Hello, what is up, everyone? My name is Caleb Marcus. Welcome to the Caleb Marcus podcast. Today, I have for you guys a conversation between me and my friend Jesse Zandee. We went to Kuiper together. We definitely share a love for thinking and just spending time talking to each other about things that matter or may not matter. I really have no idea. But I had fun and definitely expect to see Jesse back on the podcast, and we'll probably talk about more specific things next time. This time we were kind of just reconnecting. We haven't talked to each other in a while since I graduated last spring. But yeah, definitely expect him to be back on soon talking about specific things. Today was a little bit general, but I think you guys will take something from the conversation. Thanks for watching. Peace. I have a fake background here, and your background is actually really good.
Wait, yours is a fake background?
Yeah.
I guess that makes sense. It's got the apartment. That's funny. I didn't really think of it. Hey, you should have let me be ignorant about that.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, because you can just pick any picture you want off the internet, and you could put it as your background.
Oh, for real?
So yeah,
great.
So yeah, but dude, how have you been? Before we get into some philosophical talk, how have you been doing?
I've been really good. Here, I'll try to talk as I throw these in.
Yeah.
Dude, life's been good. And I'm trying to think. I guess I'll just go, but I can't remember the last time we actually caught up. So,
probably since just graduation, I would say.
Yeah, probably. I mean,
or mine, because
you're
you
graduating.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
You graduated last year, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, and cut me off if I've already repeated this, but we're living in the parsonage at Brooks Church.
Okay.
So Brooks working at Forest Grove Reformed. So that's like South Hudsonville, Jamestown area. And yeah, so this is like the office, which usually there was a missionary family that was living here before, so they lived in there. Sometimes the pastors in the past have lived in here. So you got this nice library bookshelf area in the back. So I've been digging that. But yeah, I mean, aside from that, we've just been plugging away at our ministries, and I finished up school finally. So
yeah. That's awesome. Where have you started to work anywhere since graduating, or do you know what you're going to do yet?
Right. So I'm just continuing my part-time job. It's currently a part-time job at my church, at Thornapple Community Church. But it's likely that my role there will be expanded come in the fall.
Okay.
And I just picked up a local landscaping job, which is nice. Just something outside.
Yeah, for sure. Dude, the freaking beard looks great, by the way.
Dude, thanks. I tried over the course of No Shave November, and then we had that December and January where things really died down. So I rarely saw people, especially without a mask. Yeah. So I got to get past the crappy phase. It took me 3 months to do. Brooke had to deal with it the whole time. So, yeah.
How did she feel about it? Does she feel like it was worth it by this point, or what?
It was yeah. She thinks it's turned out good. She's like, yeah, it's all right. It's grown on me. Good one, Jesse. But it's really, I've always wanted a beard. Yeah. So it's she's like, how long are you gonna keep it? I'm like, I don't know. Maybe a couple more months.
Yeah. Okay, so tips for growing this right now, okay? Because this is just laziness basically, but
sure.
do I essentially just have to bite the bullet for like, 3 months or whatever you said to have it to where it would actually go?
I think that's one aspect of it. Like
Okay.
do like 2 months at least of just letting it grow, and I can't prove whether or not this helped. I kind of cheated.
Okay.
Have you ever gotten ads for the Beard Club?
Maybe. I'm sure now I will since you said it.
Yeah,
So
the algorithm has heard
yeah,
us.
yeah.
One sec. I'm gonna quick grab a tissue. I'm like
Okay.
stuffy right now.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, the Beard Club. It's basically like you get like a starter pack of like growth vitamins, and
Okay.
it's probably like your standard, like I forget what the like collagen. It's just kind of like a
Okay.
overall. I'm not a health expert, but
Yeah, yeah.
it's just like probably grows your hair a little bit more, like all over, and beard as well. And so I took those. The bottle doesn't last very long, so I did that. And then they'll send you some like beard oil, which is like supposed to make it long. I don't know if it does or not,
Okay.
but so it might have sped up the process, but I kind of plateaued. I mean, it can get longer, but there's still some areas like here and yeah, I'm underneath where it's just not full blown, but yeah.
you committed, dude. I can respect that. I can respect that.
Yeah, well, thank Brooke for me.
And that's the best time to do it, to be honest. You know what I'm saying? Because
yeah,
once Biden had his, we don't have to wear the mask anymore since we're vaccinated, I'm done.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So,
right.
Yeah.
For sure.
But yeah. Well, since I'll just update you a little bit.
Yeah, please do.
Since I graduated, me and Elizabeth. So I graduated last May, yeah, and then we bought a house in June. So we live like right, let's see, like Hall and Fuller by Hall Street Bakery,
Sure.
kind of like on the outskirts of Ottawa Hills, East Grand Rapids area.
Yeah, yeah.
We have a really nice neighborhood, and neighbors that are awesome. So yeah, we've just been settling in here, and since I graduated, I've just been working at this place called Quality Edge, just running a machine for them. They make like exterior housing products and stuff.
Sure.
And then I'm probably going to be figuring out and transitioning into like a teaching, like a transition to teaching program for high school.
Okay.
So yeah, I got to get a couple of things like figured out before I enter that program, but I'm thinking of doing that soon. But yeah, other than that, we're still going to Calvary and doing things there. So, but yeah, it's been good.
Is John still there?
John's still there, dude. John is so they have like a pastoral residency, and John started it, but then kind of put it on pause, and he's like a associate director, or he's like assistant to the director of facilities, basically.
Sure.
And so he's doing that, and obviously, yeah, he got married, and then I don't know if you knew that his wife is pregnant as well.
I don't think I knew that. Oh, yeah, that's awesome.
Neither of them are on Facebook, so
that makes sense.
Yeah, so they don't really they're not really broadcasting it by any means, but yeah, she's like 29 or 30 weeks, dude. She's like,
oh wow.
Yeah, so they're like about to have a baby. I think they're due August 1st.
Dang, that's coming up.
So yeah, that's pretty crazy. Yeah, so that's crazy. But Yeah, well, let's. So I didn't really know what we were going to talk about today, but I figured since we like the same people, generally we should be able to find something. But
Absolutely.
something kind of popped up today. So
Mm.
one of the benefits with my work right now is that uh, I've gotten to the point where I don't really. It's kind of like I don't really have to think too much in my job. It's kind of muscle memory at this point, and I can kind of have a headphone or one earbud in, and I just listen to podcasts or whatever, like literally all day. Like
Sure.
it's pretty, yeah, it's pretty great to be honest. And I want to mention too, I got a little notebook here, so if I look down, I'm just writing stuff so I don't forget.
Sounds
Um,
good.
but so I'll go my top three right now as
Mm.
far as podcasts go is Jordan Peterson. I love that he's coming back and just pumping out the
He's
stuff,
back. Yeah,
which
yeah.
is awesome. I love Jocko. Do you know Jocko Willink?
Dude, I recognize the shirt. Discipline
Okay,
equals
yeah,
freedom.
let's go.
Let's go.
So
Good.
yeah, good. I listen to his podcast as well, basically like everyone that comes out.
Mm.
And then I hadn't really been a big political person at all, but more recently in the past maybe like 6 to 8 months, I've kind of been getting more into it. And so I've been listening to Tim Pool,
Mm.
his podcast, and I find the people that I like the most are people who sort of like initially started out like on the left, so to speak, and then just kind of realized like, oh, there's a lot of kind of crazy stuff going here.
Sure.
So I'm just gonna kind of like move maybe to the middle ish. And like Brett Weinstein, I would
Mm-hmm.
say that's another person who's like, calls himself progressive or on the liberal side, but then doesn't go kind of crazy with things. Same with like Joe Rogan and stuff. So I like him. I like Brett Weinstein's podcast a lot too. He's super smart.
Yeah.
But yeah, but I was let me get like three of your top podcasts at the moment, and then I want to
Mm.
jump into something that just popped out to me today.
Sure. Let's see. At the moment, like you, I've kept up on Peterson basically since the beginning. I kind of entered the intellectual dark web world through Shapiro, Ben
Okay.
Shapiro, which people might hear that and be like, "Oh, isn't he some crazy right wing guy?" And I get it. He kind of turns certain people off, but
Yeah.
he's that person who kind of introduced me into the sphere of like he loves to have conversations across the aisle, and he's really not the sort of gotcha type of guy that he's often made out to be. So you need to have conversations with people like Brett, like Jordan, like
Yeah.
Sam Harris. I actually got on the as of recently, I got on the subscriber feed for Sam Harris. I
Okay.
listen to him frequently. And are you familiar with Sam?
I know him just based off of I just put an interview that I don't remember who it was with. It might have been Jordan recently. I'm not sure. But there
Hmm.
was some interview that he was on that I put on my watch later. And I know that he and Jordan had like a long, like maybe debate or
Right.
whatever on like truth. I haven't
Mm-hmm.
actually listened to that, ironically, which I should. But I know he's kind of like um, I don't even know how to necessarily describe him. I know he's some
Militant
sort,
atheist.
yeah, like an
Yeah.
atheist. And
Yeah.
so I knew that about him. I do need to get more educated on him and some of his views. But anyways, yeah, go ahead.
Well, and he's somebody who, like, he is like when I think of like a philosophical rationalist, like he is the person that embodies that more than anybody I know. And
Okay.
actually, Ben is actually very similar to that, just very like straightforward thinking.
Yeah.
Granted, and again, like I disagree with Sam on like 90% of issues.
Okay.
I defend him in front of people. Like I treat these people like they're my friends and they don't even know me.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
But other than that, Sam, I've been listening to a lot of Coleman Hughes recently. He's a young, aspiring Black intellectual. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Never mind. That's not who I thought it was.
Yeah, he's got a good podcast. He's a sort of a Sam Harris prodigy, I think, too. But what else? Yeah, the Weinsteins. I wish Eric.
Ballers.
I've been listening. I was first listening to Brett, and then I've been listening to more Eric Weinstein.
Yeah.
I'll just quick mention that episode 19 on Eric's podcast, The Portal. That is one of the best podcasts I've ever listened to.
Okay.
That is mind-blowing.
I think that's the one, like I shared something on Facebook and then you commented. I think it was that one that I need to look into because I've listened to Eric on a whole bunch of other people's podcasts. Right. But I haven't listened to his specifically yet. But yeah, he's pretty awesome.
I mean, aside from the philosophical side of things, like I've listened to every episode of the Bible Project. Shout out to them. They're awesome.
They are awesome.
I love what they do. I want to quick look up there's a specific episode. It's on Sam Harris's podcast. And I think it was one of the best podcasts of 2020. Let me see. It was in May. Yeah. Oh, okay. So it's episode 207. It's called "Can We Pull Back from the Brink?" Okay. And if you remember what was happening around that time, it'll be a very challenging, very yeah. I found a huge podcast.
Okay.
For the times.
Okay. Maybe I'll listen to that one and then we can do another one of these and break it down.
Absolutely, man. Anytime.
That'd be great.
Let's do it.
Okay, so you just opened up like a lot of portals that we could go through right now.
Sure.
Which we can definitely. I'll touch on one thing before we can go to what I kind of thought of today. But it's funny because Ben Shapiro was kind of my pathway into that sort of sphere, I would say, in the first place too. Kind of just like, and it started with the gotcha of all the college kids that I can't help but love it. Like, it's just great. Especially, literally my favorite video maybe ever is the one where it's like Ben Shapiro wrecks like this socialist kid or whatever. And it's this Asian, it's an Indian guy, and he's in like a yellow jacket, and he's talking about the pencil factory. Have you seen that clip?
I don't think so. It doesn't ring a bell.
Okay. I'll send you the link after we get off. But yeah.
Okay, sounds good.
I might just put it in the podcast right here so people can see it, and then bring it back. But it's just hilarious. I'll just let you watch it. I don't want to ruin it for you. But anyways, yeah, he was kind of the person that brought me into everything. And I saw like his Sunday specials, and it's like, like when he has a long conversation with people, even with like Andrew Yang or something, who he definitely doesn't agree with, he doesn't do any gotchas whatsoever. It's like he just brings up, so like, you agree with UBI or you think we should have this? Well, I mean, what happens when people say it shouldn't be 1,000, it should be 2,000, like, so I thought he was really good in that kind of opened me up. But,
for sure.
Yeah. Anyways. Okay. So today I was listening to Jocko's podcast number 280, which is, I'm like 2 behind, I think, but it was with, Daryl Cooper, who is just absolute beast. That's who he does the Unraveling podcast with. And then Daryl Cooper has his own podcast called Martyr Made, which for anyone listening, he does like 10 episodes on the history behind Israel and Palestine conflict,
Mm.
which is legit because
Okay.
he starts in like 1890
Sure.
and then just goes all the way through until basically like present day. And it really helped me understand way more of like why this is happening and kind of whose fault it is in a certain sense. Even though I listened to all of that and I still don't even know which side. I'm kind of I don't want to like
Mm.
get into all of that, but
Sure.
it's just so much more complicated than many people realize, you know? And then it
Yeah.
was like people are like having the Facebook profile thing, like I stand with this side or I stand with this. It's like,
Right.
dude, you literally, I guarantee you have no idea what
Hmm.
has all gone into this, you know? But anyways,
Right.
so that episode was about
What number
the
was it?
280, I believe.
Okay.
And it was about the Armenian genocide.
Yep.
Have you ever heard of that?
I've heard of I actually have it on queue because I don't listen to every episode of Jocko, but
Okay.
I saw that one and I was like, ooh, I
Okay.
put that on my watch later. So
So I will warn you, it's a kind of a downer
oh
because
sure.
I mean
Yeah.
it's yeah, and I wouldn't have like kids listen to it or anything,
Sure.
but it was legit. And it was something that an event that I didn't even know really happened. I had no grasp of that happening at all.
Hmm.
And then through Daryl Cooper's Martyr Made podcast was really the only history that I got on like World War One. So then I
Mm.
understood as like, okay, the Ottoman Empire was involved, and that was kind of one of the main opposing forces. And Britain and all of these other European countries were kind of fighting against it. And I don't have a comprehensive understanding of it. But yeah, they were just talking through that, and the Ottoman Empire is like the Turks, right? And so the Turks were basically like banded together, trying to band together all the Muslims, and then basically the Turkish or the Ottoman Empire, but the Turks at the time just said like, oh yeah, these Armenian Christians, you can just if you want to go ahead and kill them or drive them out of this land, like go ahead, basically, you know. And then there's like hundreds of thousands of them killed and whatnot. And then nowadays, and this was in 1915 or so, like right when World War One was starting. And to this day, the Turks don't like I don't want to say take credit, but take responsibility for it whatsoever.
Sure.
And they try to push it underneath the surface like it never happened, you know?
Hmm.
And even 30 years later, Hitler in like the 1940s is recorded to have said, like, who remembers the Armenians? So even 30 years later, he's like, no one remembers these guys. So what we do to the Jews, like no one's gonna remember this in 30 years. You know what I'm
Mm.
saying? Which
Sure.
is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
And there, people were trying to. There was this lady who tried to write this book. It was getting like all sorts of death threats and whatnot from the Turkish government. And this was just like a couple years ago.
Mm.
And so it's just very interesting that they're trying to just keep that on the DL. And I remember in I don't know what class it was, but it was with Professor Hogenboom, and she spent a lot of time in Turkey. And she talked about how if you bring up the Crusades, they act like it happened like yesterday, and they're
Yeah.
still very angry and bitter about it, which I totally understand. Like I'm not going to act like
Hmm.
they don't have a reason for that.
Sure.
But and at the time I was like, dang, yeah, that's not good. But then I was like, when I learned all of this stuff today, I'm like, you guys are so mad about this thing that happened like 800 years ago, and then or whatever, I'm not exactly sure. And then you're just going to try to stamp down this thing that you guys did 100 years ago. It kind of like pissed me
Hmm.
off, to be honest.
Yeah. No,
But
absolutely. it is crazy how I'm gonna reference a podcast. It's the language I speak in. There's Paul Bloom is a psychologist who was on. I know he was on Sam Harris's podcast.
Okay.
Anyways, that's a reference. But he talks about how, like, because of how our brains work, how we empathize is not actually in empathy is not always a good thing, is what his conclusion is. And in how this plays out is we are more likely to donate to or want to help an individual. So like you have the picture, it's the stereotypical like picture of a young girl overseas, like, oh, would you donate to this person?
Yeah.
And then we've studied this. So when you add her brother in, the likelihood of, just in the picture, the likelihood of somebody donating goes down with every person that's added. So it's crazy. The problem gets bigger, but people are less inclined to recognize or want to help. So especially when we talk about Armenian genocide.
Yeah.
What happened under Maoist China.
Yeah.
Soviet Union, the gulags, let alone Nazi Germany. Like we're now in the hundreds of millions.
Yeah.
Which is and it's impossible for our brains to like get around.
Yeah.
Like actually picture not just one, but one times a million.
And
that's thousands.
And those like four things, and like Rwandan genocide too,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
all of that is within basically 100 years.
Oh, we got the Uyghur Muslims being in actual torture concentration camps right now.
Right, currently
in China, right?
Yeah,
it's crazy.
So, I gotta tell you a story after you're going with this, but yeah, keep on going. That was.
I mean, my one thing was, I mean, for those who, like, I grew up in a military family, and that's not to say like, I understand how things are. Like, I mean, my brother was, working within special operations, so it's very much it's a violent world, and I don't wish that upon everybody to like understand that. I don't understand that, right? I just am a witness of a witness, but I think it's very important. Again, I'm not a war hawk. I'm not a pacifist. I'm a Christian. I'm somewhere, somewhere in the middle. But that's beside the point. I think it's very important for people who. I think it's important for everybody to listen to Jocko, because he is somebody who can get you in that world, and to actually not just to say like that's not some like slight-handed like so you're more pro-military. That's not the point at all. It's just so that you understand what's going on, what has gone on in the world, like because that's human history right there. It's war. It's a mess, and we gotta understand that aspect of history in order to understand ourselves.
Yeah, and going off that, I had such an interesting conversation with my cousin, who is 15. He's a freshman, and I was hanging out at his house in his room, and I was kind of looking at some of his homework, right? And he had like a history packet, and it was stuff like on the Holocaust. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. Like, did you just start this, or have you been learning about this a lot? He's like, dude, I don't want to like, I kind of feel bad saying this, but it's like, we've been learning about the Holocaust like every year for the past like 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, yeah, I kind of like know about it, And he's like, I feel bad saying that, but we've just been learning about this every single year. And it's like, we had this conversation in class, and it was like, will this ever happen again? And I was like, oh no, this will never happen again. Like, why do we need to worry about it? And I was like, dude, like, not only will it happen again, like it has happened again, and it's like currently happening with the Uyghur Muslims, like you were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, we could get into North Korea in a certain way too, right? And so like,
sure.
I kind of just talked to him without trying to scare him too bad, but talked to him a little bit about the Uyghur Muslims and stuff going on in China. And he was just like, what? Like, why are we not learning about that? And then, like, that 100 million number that you talked about, like, most people only know about the 6 or 7 million, and that's like it. You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of crazy that we just as a culture, maybe that's just like a Western thing. Like maybe Eastern countries would know more. What do you think?
I think let's compare the atrocities that happened under Soviet Russia, like compared to like Stalin and Hitler. What makes them different?
Yeah.
I think the Holocaust stands out so much, and this is obviously in no way to diminish the Holocaust. The Holocaust is so terrible because of the numbers and because it was so targeted. You're targeting one race, one people, and other fringe people within European society, and you're doing a full-on genocide of a targeted people group. Yeah. That's what makes the Holocaust stand out, and it's its success to do so, and the hatred and the disgust that's embedded in that within Hitler and his whole ideology, and then there's Stalin. So it's like, what's worse, somebody like targeting specific people or somebody just, spraying? Because that's what the Soviet Union is, just starving people by the millions, exterminating, imprisoning people by the millions, their own people, based on class. It's getting into Marxist boundaries, and really just whoever had, are you familiar with you listen to Peterson, so you're familiar with like Solzhenitsyn and the Gulag Archipelago. I started reading the book, but it's dense, the abridged version, and it's dense, but getting into that, like they were beginning to target their own people who, fought in the West and even talked to capitalists. It's like, all right, you got tainted, we're throwing you in the Gulag. And so there's something, it's hard to like, you have the directed hate on one side with the Nazis, and then you have the all out just catastrophe. I think this is so strange to me. Historians guesstimate that it's somewhere in between 20 and 60 million. It's like, how is it some vague number in between that? Like, we don't even know. Yeah. It might even be more than that, which is, like, Russia's a big country. Yeah. But I think that's what has to do with like why we focus more on stuff like Rwanda, like the Rwandan genocide and the Holocaust, is for those reasons. But
because they're so targeted. Yeah.
Well, and I one last thing while I'm thinking of it is, once I found out about the gulags and the Soviet Union, let alone Maoist China, which was arguably even worse, and I am so uneducated on that. I was kind of like frustrated with my upbringing. I was like, why was I never taught this? Yeah. Teach me about the Holocaust. Teach me about the Armenian genocide. Like, teach me about all the ugly stuff in history, so that we know what happened in the world.
And so just listening to this Jocko podcast today about this Armenian genocide, like I had that same feeling, like, why did I never hear this before? But then I also was like, man, like going back to my 15-year-old cousin, I don't even know if I would want him to like hear this. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know how. I think the school would have to like dumb it down, I guess, or not dumb it down, but just maybe go less on the details, because they were getting like pretty into some of the details, like just going into a village, making them all just march out to just through the desert. And then whoever makes it to their location, which is basically just like a death camp, they just get killed. And it was like, they take them and it wasn't like in Germany where they have like either gas chambers or they just shoot them or whatever and kind of make it a process. It was like they lead all these people into a valley, like 5 to 8,000 people, put direct them to this valley, and then just take either axes or hatchets or machetes and all this different kinds of stuff and just surround them from all sides and just hack them to bits, you know? And it's like literally this would take like hours and hours and hours. And it wasn't like this is the military or whatever. This is just the Muslim village that's a couple miles down just got this authority from the government to go and kill the Christians. And this is what happened. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, and there's like even more horrible details than that. And it's like, man, how do we teach our kids in the schools what happened without like making them throw up in class? You know what I'm saying?
Right. I think there's some wisdom in just like gradual exposure. So maybe, I don't know if that means like starting out from like, 4,000 feet, just kind of hovering over like, let's say a war, like who's fighting who, and maybe some of the more boring details. I think it's hard to make history boring personally.
Yeah.
Like, you have to really try, because just looking at it, history blunt in the face, like it is anything but boring.
Yeah.
But like you said, I mean, I remember hearing about Emmett Till from a pretty young age, and like that disturbed me.
That's true.
Maybe they could have waited a couple years, and right, there's some utility in like knowing. Yeah, it's so hard, man. It's so hard because like you need people, you need kids to be exposed to the world and know about what's going on, what's happened, but you don't want to overwhelm them. You don't want to like make them shut down and then become naive and never want to learn about history.
For sure.
I don't have a good answer.
Yeah. Speaking of, I remember that too, like maybe sometime in high school, but they showed, I remember there's like a picture of him in the book, like after that happened. And obviously he's like unrecognizable, and I definitely remember that too. Wow.
Yeah. That definitely stuck with me.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, switching gears a little bit. I want to go back because I cannot believe I did this, but I missed Lex Friedman when I was talking about the podcast.
Oh, sure.
So Lex is my freaking boy as well.
Yeah.
Like I love Lex so much. He might be like my favorite podcast right now. I just love everything about him. Like just how people make jokes that he's a machine or whatever, and
he's a robot. 01001.
Those things are just hilarious, and he's just such a good guy. Did you see the episode when he had his dad on?
I did not.
Dude, go back. You should definitely watch it. It was fascinating.
Okay.
So his dad was a physicist, which is like not that surprising. And he looks exactly like what you would think a Russian physicist would look like, which is pretty funny. And like growing up, he grew up in Russia, and in like I think it was like in the 8th grade, he entered in this competition, this physics competition, which I think they do in America. I was never part of any of that, but he was in this physics competition and he was number 2 in his age group in all of Russia. Yeah. So this guy is like a freaking genius. And, just thinking of like what that would be like to have that kind of person as your dad is just like insane. But yeah, the conversation was awesome because like Lex does, he always asks like super hard questions. Like he asked his own dad, "Do you think you were a good father?" And like just questions like that. And I was like, ooh, like it was crazy. Yeah. So yeah, he's pretty awesome and definitely inspires me to just be better every day as far as like being productive and not waste time in order to just maximize my time here on earth to do like what God put me here to do. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah.
Dude, Lex is I love his just innocent curiosity and his love. Like I don't know. Does he ask that at the end of every podcast? Like, what is love? What is the meaning of life? I know he
Yeah.
asks it often, so I don't
Yes.
know how
So
much so.
he'll ask him sorry, my dog.
Oh, you're good.
He doesn't he doesn't ask what is love every time, but he will say, do you think about your mortality?
Sure.
So kind of thinking about that, and then like what's the meaning of life, which is so interesting because I love hearing people's answers on that. You know what I mean? It's really fascinating.
Yeah.
But okay, sorry. Go ahead.
I remember he just had Sam Harris on, so I listened to that. And I listened to the Michael Malice podcast with him, and I do love whenever he has Eric Weinstein on.
Yeah.
I love their interactions because I think Eric brings the best out of people. He's very blunt, as you know.
Yeah.
But he has a good way of like what do you really want to talk about?
Yeah, for sure. That's hilarious. What do you think of Michael Malice?
He was not as like provocative as I was expecting. Like I've heard of like, I know he's been referenced as like a troll before, and definitely not what I was expecting. I really enjoyed him. I enjoyed how he toys with Lex and brings the best out of him too.
Yeah.
No, I enjoy it.
I found him so interesting because he was the first and this is like 3 or 4 months ago, who kind of introduced me to just like the philosophy, I guess you could call it, of anarchism, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And when the normal person, probably most people listening to this, hears anarchism, they're like, oh, that's just like no government and there's just violence everywhere and crazy things happening. Or you think of like the Purge movie or whatever. And the way he explains it is just not that, like, at all, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually does explain it in a really interesting way, where and one of the things he says is like, most of the criticisms that you bring against anarchism are things that are already happening right now. You know what I mean? Which is so interesting. And then like, I don't agree with him on everything. Obviously, I don't really agree with anyone on everything.
Right.
But especially him and Tim Pool recently about like the cops. Have you heard like some of their explanations for like just getting rid of the police and stuff?
Yeah, I have heard. I remember when he first mentioned the idea of sort of getting rid of that like centralized, like a federal, or even a state police force, and it's very interesting. I mean, who really knows? I doubt it would happen. I wouldn't be as optimistic as him.
Yeah,
you know, I'm a fan of like private security. You know, I have good faith in private security firms and stuff. My whole thing with like the anarchism is, I mean, it's kind of an order chaos balance, as I'm sure Peterson would bring up. Like, how long would that last? Like, I'm not talking about like how like long would stability last. Like he mentioned, stability is relative. Like,
yeah,
what does actual stability mean on a political scale, on a federal scale? Which I appreciate. You know, he makes a really good case for it. But it's in our nature to set up like meta hierarchies of power, of ruling, and I think it would only be a matter of time before people do that. Now, I'm not saying that's a good thing. You know, maybe that's a bad thing. I do have much more if you were to press me down, I have much more like libertarian, leaning towards what I think he's already talking about, which is kind of a soft anarchism, if that's a good way to put it. But like very much limiting what the government actually does, which wouldn't be. It would look different from what it does today, but I don't think it'd be as terrible as people think it is. So I agree with him in like if you take away a lot of the things that government does now, like it wouldn't be terrible. But again, plenty of people would disagree with me on that. That's just my opinion.
So it's funny because I've been learning a lot about libertarianism as well in the past couple months. Sure. And mainly through Dave Smith, actually. Do you know Dave Smith?
Dave Smith. I don't know that name.
Okay, so he goes hard. So he kind of started as like a stand-up comedian, and then just kind of like went into politics. And he has his own podcast called Part of the Problem. It's kind of similar to Timcast, I would say. He just kind of like narrates like what's going on in the political landscape, so to speak. Sure. And he's like very involved in the Libertarian Party, and he was even talking with Michael Malice. Actually, they're on the same like podcasting network, like Gas Digital Network or whatever. So they had a bunch of crossovers, and he was saying that he was going to run for president and then have Michael Malice as his press secretary, which would be just, I would just love to see that. That'd be hilarious. But Dave Smith goes hard. I saw him he's been on Joe Rogan a bunch of times. Sure. So I just saw him relatively recently on Joe Rogan, and he's like hardcore, like end the war on drugs. So just legalize all drugs. Sure. Which is interesting. Get rid of all the cops. What else did he say? Yeah, like end every single war. Just basically stop everything that we're doing. You know what I'm saying? So it's just really interesting. And okay, what do you think about legalizing all drugs?
It's a great question. I have not nailed down. So I'm for it in general. Like for example, like our dichotomy of alcohol as a drug being legal and then marijuana not being legal, I think is absurd. Again, like I don't know. I don't know if I need to offer every caveat, like, I'm not a drug expert. Doesn't matter. Everybody knows this. Yeah. But I'm not saying alcohol should be illegal. If anything, I'm saying the opposite. Like, there's X amount of drugs, especially marijuana. I don't know how much further to go from there. Like, I know there's, in terms of recreational use, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not, I guess I'll just say, I'm not qualified enough. Like, there's certain drugs. Psychedelics is an interesting question, which I'll shelve for now, because who knows what's going on with those. Might be a lot of good, lots of unknowns. Who knows? Yeah. But in terms of like cocaine, I don't know. I'm very open to that. Yeah. I think if you were to implement something like that, this is kind of the theme of really any good policy is, what's the goal? Legalize all drugs. Cool. Yeah. When do we want that? Sometime in the soon. And then how do we want to do that? Incrementally. Yeah. So like over a long period of time, like slowly push that back, because I don't know what would happen if we would just like opened up the gate and said, all right, it's all legal, go at it.
I think we would have to probably do it incrementally. I don't remember where I heard this now, but um, I want to say it was, and the thing is, humans, they just won't they won't notice if you do things incrementally as well, which is kind of funny. Like, let's say we made it like 1%, all drugs 1% more legal over like the year, like in 100 years everything would be legal, and everyone would just be like, oh, this is it, because it was like eBay when they first came out with the website, the backdrop was all yellow, okay, and they wanted it to be white, and so they just changed it to white, and then everyone freaked out. They were like, this backdrop sucks, I want the old yellow back, I hate this white, right? And so eBay, this is actually really smart, every single day they go one shade of pigment towards white, and then eventually after like 5 years or something, it was totally white and no one said anything.
Beautiful.
Which is just like so smart. So yeah, that, I mean, I don't know how you make drugs 1% more legal, but I definitely think if you made it incrementally a thing, then well, it's kind of scary because with that, like, you could really, if you just made incremental changes for anything, like, eventually we just get to the point where we don't really notice, you know what I mean?
Sure.
Potentially that could be a bad thing.
And I'm totally open to the argument that like everybody who's wanting to do X drug is already doing it.
Yeah.
I'm perfectly open to that.
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot of things that follow in that camp, whether that's whether that's guns or other things, not to go down those rabbit holes, but and I think a lot of, it might sound weird, like for us, like Christians, to be talking about that. Like, what? Like, do you think drugs are good? It's like, no, I don't. Of course I don't. Like, I mean, most drugs, I don't smoke.
Yeah.
I'll have I'll drink my, so typical Michigander, like I'll drink my craft beer and every once in a while, like, but you won't see me doing any of those drugs, but just purely on a governmental.
Yes.
Like, I tell people, like, if you ask me, I'm governmentally libertarian. That is so different from the Libertarian Party today, which is a mess, and is more culturally libertarian, which is, just scary.
Yeah.
Anyways.
And this was something I was actually talking to John about this recently, and we were kind of having like a little debate on it, but it was just like, I think this is a good topic to get into. Like, how do we as Christians kind of separate our religious beliefs and ideals and whatnot, and what we think? Okay, before we go there,
sure,
is there a certain government or style of government or whatever that you could even say that every Christian should be aiming for this? You know what I'm saying?
I don't really, I guess I can't say like that there is one that Christians from a biblical basis like should be aiming towards. I think it is less to do with like what is the ultimate, what is the right setup for government, and more of like, I honestly don't think that question is really addressed that much. Within
because I was talking about how me and John were kind of just talking about freedom, and how especially the Libertarian Party, their main focus is on like individual freedom. You can do what you want to do. If you want to do heroin, you can do that, as long as you're not, like, if you have kids and they're getting neglected, CPS will come. But if you're just like a normal person, or a single person, I mean, and you just want to do heroin, then you can do that. You know what I'm saying? Or whatever. and we were kind of just talking about like, okay, there's certain governmental policies taking liberties away and freedoms away and different things like that. And he was like, yeah, I just that doesn't really bother me at all because like I still have my freedom in Christ, you know? So all of these other freedoms, like I don't really, they're kind of just like secondary. It's like I don't really care about them that much. And I'm generalizing. That's not exactly what he said. But yeah, it was just really interesting to think about it because like yes, at to a certain extent, like no matter what my state of freedom in relationship to the government is, like I will always have my freedom in Christ, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean that I don't care about my freedom in a relationship to the government as
Sure.
well. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, it's really hard to like nuance where even just how to talk about this issue because a lot of people just I think sort of the average person just sort of inherits whatever political backdrop they're given from a young age, or they react to the other side and then sort of map that onto the Bible, like, oh, this is what it means to like
mm,
whether it's build the kingdom or be be a moral person.
yeah,
Uh, that looks a lot different for different people. I think the Reformed tradition here has been good, and it goes back further than that. But this idea of like I don't know if you're familiar with like the idea of like two kingdoms. Um, is the idea of that like is the church supposed to be merged with the government? Is it supposed to be torn away from the government? Are they like separate institutions? Private matters over here, public matters over here.
okay,
I think the two kingdoms view I'll try to represent it well, which I believe lines up well with the Bible, is that there's the kingdoms of this world, there's the nations, they're doing their thing.
yep,
They sometimes, like Book of Proverbs, like sometimes even the nations like rule according to wisdom. Like there are wise ways and unwise ways to rule,
yeah,
and which what counts as wise or unwise. What works well for the people, what works well within God's design. And then with Jesus, with Israel, with the church, we have God's kingdom planted right in the middle of that. So there's some strange overlap where we're called to be like a different kingdom not of this world, in the midst of sort of the common kingdom. So
right,
that's kind of
okay,
like
interesting,
overlapping circles.
yeah.
But, and
But
so it's tough. Like you want to
yeah,
seek the good of the city. What was that, Jeremiah? But also like there is a distinct way of life within the kingdom, and we're not
yeah,
called to impose that on people outside the church. And sometimes it's going to look like the common kingdom persecuting the church.
yeah,
It's not like they're always meant to live in harmony.
yeah, for sure. And I don't know about you, but since I think what you were talking about as far as having these two kingdoms, right? And then not trying to push our values or whatever on the outside world or whatever. But I feel like Christians have sort of failed in my view of like especially once COVID started or whatnot, like all of the different things that we're like bickering back and forth on, whether it has to do with the mask or like the vaccines or whatever, which if you just have like a decent grasp of like Romans 14 and disputable matters, like it shouldn't even be a thing that we're arguing about at all.
Right.
And we should just be on the same page so that our kingdom is together, because even when you go into the church, like it's almost like there's two kingdoms in there. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So it's just kind of disappointing, because
Hmm.
especially like at our church, like the mask thing was like a huge deal. And it's like, dude,
Yeah. Yeah.
like if you want to wear it, just wear it. If you
Uh-huh.
don't, then don't. Don't
Yeah.
judge the other person for it. Don't judge the stronger or the lesser, wherever you want to put that person.
Hmm.
At the end of the day, you're going to be accountable to God. Let's roll. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Like it's not that hard. And yeah, I don't
Hmm.
know.
I part of me wishes the scandal that instead of like whether it's like not wearing masks or whatever you want to fill in the blank, like
Yeah,
I wish the scandal that the church was known for was that we had all just merged so much as and really lived into the gospel of becoming one family, meeting, eating together at each other's houses, that when it comes down to like, like, all right, everybody with, meet just at like your home or like just your immediate family, that was the scandal. Like,
yeah,
I don't know, that people were so used to living as a new family that was like, well, no, I'm meeting with my brothers and sisters again within reason, not like crazy large gatherings. I'm
yeah,
not
yeah,
endorsing that at all, but sort of like, and I think that is the problem. Like, it's the tradition of, I'm sure Taylor, our friend Taylor Little would be able to go off on this. Like, we're so used to church being these big groups, face forward gatherings when, you know, I, maybe the majority of it's supposed to be, or at least a part of it, is supposed to be us meeting in these little pocket groups of disciples and, eating, talking, praying together. And there's something always sort of scandalous about that. But
yeah, for sure. Um, Okay, let's go last topic, and then we can wrap it up. But then we'll definitely have to do this again,
of
probably
course.
multiple times. Um, but there's another thing I was talking to John about.
Mhm.
So let's see. In your view, what makes because going off that, what you were just saying about Taylor and how he would kind of advocate for more of the house church atmosphere rather than the face forward gatherings of the big church and whatnot. And I think what most people would kind of counter to that is like, yes, there is a big church environment where you get together, you have the face forward gathering, but then you have like a small group that ideally you would be meeting with, outside of that gathering. And then that's kind of going to be feeding into what you'd kind of be like doing at your house church, like having a meal and doing like a little Bible study sort of thing and getting into each other's lives and being able to share that with each other.
Mhm. Mhm.
And and me and John were talking about small groups, and you can kind of, I don't know how you necessarily define that, but the difference between maybe small group and like a sort of life group almost, where you kind of choose a group. And me and Elizabeth had this, like we have three other young couples that we just call it small group, but we have this group and we meet every other week and try to hang out as much as we can around that, and then we do a Bible study. And we've basically committed, like we are going to be in this group basically forever unless something crazy happens, like our kids are growing
Mhm.
up together, this is happening, you know what I'm saying?
Sure.
And that would be different from like maybe a different small group or house church, whatever you want to call it, that maybe Taylor would lead, because that's like almost a revolving door 24/7. You get a couple people in, they stay for a couple months, kind of get the feel of it. Now they're getting sent out to do their own thing.
Sure.
So it's like, what do you think about sort of the revolving door small group infrastructure compared to like, this is our group, we're doing this for life? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's something this is something we did a lot of talking about in the last class that I took at Kuiper was Dr. Fisher's master's spiritual formation class. Spiritual formation and discipleship is the name of that. And we did a lot of talking about like just the different contexts for church. There's I think this even came up for our internship class, but in one of our books, but there's like the public context. So that's like the crowds, that's the corporate gatherings, sort of the 70 plus size groups for like a I don't know, your average church. Then there's the social context. So this is like, where we're, big group gets together and eats meals or, goes to like a football game or something. That's around that like 30 to 70 people. You all know each other's faces. There's, it's a social gathering. Get deeper, get into the personal context. So that's like around your 10 to 12 people. So now you're getting a lot more vulnerability. There's accountability. I like to think of that as sort of like everybody has different terms, but that's my youth group size right now. Like,
Yeah.
we got a life, we call it a life group.
Okay.
So our very close friends, we met in 2017, and I don't think we've made that like verbal commitment, but we see it as a very like lifelong thing where we meet together. But then there's even like that deeper level, which we experience, and is doing koinonia, our discipleship group.
That's
the transparent, called the transparent context. And like, we know what that's like and how much deeper you can grow and like really meaningful accountability. Like I compare it to like a marriage type of like commitment and accountability. Like, everything's out in the open. It's transparent.
Yeah, for sure.
Praying with each other. Yeah. And then there's that divine context, one-on-one. So like, I think there's room if we can, I think there's wisdom in how we can live into these different, it's not all just group sizes. Like it depends on the people.
Yeah.
Depends on the group, but I think there's wisdom in that, in how we gather, what our gatherings are for. But yeah, in terms of like the revolving door, that's a whole nother question of time. Like, like I think profession of faith, I've been critiquing a lot of this recently within my own mind, but like how we do profession of faith. Most churches do profession of faith, like within the Reformed tradition, maybe assign somebody with a mentor. They maybe read through some scripture, talk about stuff, make sure you're checking all the boxes. Maybe that's a couple weeks. I don't know. Like maybe it's like a couple months.
Yeah.
Scattered gatherings. But, I started doing this. It's a program. It's more about the concept behind the program, because I'm not that big a fan of every curriculum. Who is? But it's called 222 Disciple, based off of 2 Timothy 2:2. And like there's like 26 or 27 like weekly 1 hour plus sessions for one person to run through, and then that person will take somebody else through it. So that's like a one-on-one deal.
Okay.
But it's it's like 26 weeks. Like you might miss a week and like life happens. It's a long deal.
Yeah.
Like and I think we love things that are short, like really short track.
Yeah.
Like whether it's in ministry within the church. And I can't really speak for the house church model. I don't know what Taylor does, what other people do, but there is something to like, all right, I like high school in this sense of like, it's 4 years.
Yeah.
I see my kids through when they come through 8th grade into high school, and I have them all the way throughout. I've seen them over a length of period of time, and then they can move on and somebody else can disciple them, and I can try and transition them well. So I mean, sorry, I did not like answer your question because I'm not that familiar with
I like this tangent that we're
the concept, but I don't know. Those are some of my thoughts when it comes to like how we do church is.
So when you're talking about all these different layers, right? When it comes to like the public and then the social, was it private, personal,
yeah,
and so on. Do you think that it's because obviously there's a lot of Christians who potentially just have the public,
right,
and then like maybe their personal like one-on-one with God,
right.
and that's it. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah,
would you say that you kind of have to have some kind of engagement in all those levels, or is it okay to have a zero on some of those levels? You know what I'm saying?
right. It's not, it's not like perfect, but I think some engagement, if anything, we should start from we had a lot of discussion about this in class. Like the priorities are often, like you said, public and then just me and God, and if anything, it should be like, it's often viewed as like decreasing level of importance, and we should totally flip that. Like I should be, focused on my relationship with God above everything else, spiritual disciplines, yada, yada, yada. Again, without being legalistic.
Yeah.
Then comes my small group of brothers and sisters, whatever that looks like, discipleship group, small group, whatever that is. Have a larger group of whether that's families, singles, couples. A mix is great, where you're being a new family together, you're sharing food, you're eating together, praying together.
Intergenerational.
And a lot of it can just be chill. Intergenerational,
well.
yeah. And like it can be, a lot of it can be chill. Like you're just, especially as you go up or get in the larger context, like a lot of it can just be sort of you're just eating and catching up about life. That's awesome. But having our priorities right, I think is huge for really any church model or size. Some churches won't be big enough to do the full on, like the real public context and all that. But I think that's okay. It's hard to do social stuff during COVID.
Yeah.
It's easier. And that's why I've really taken advantage of this program in the midst of COVID, because one-on-ones are a lot easier. Smaller groups are better.
Yeah.
So that's been, I think that's been good. But,
that's awesome. Yeah. Next time I want to talk about because you've essentially been like, in essence, like a youth pastor for like how many years now?
So I came to Thornapple Community Church at the beginning of Kuiper. So like, well, even before that. So it was like 4.5 years ago. Actually, no, coming up on 5. And
so your job description in that, maybe not totally fleshed out, right, but in essence, you're basically the youth pastor, right?
Well, I went from volunteer for 2 years, and then I came on now 2 years ago as the high school youth director, and now I'm the middle school and high school youth director. So
okay, yeah. Gotcha.
Yeah,
that's crazy. So, and you went through full-time school doing that, so that's extremely impressive by itself.
Well, it worked out well in terms of like, it was a part-time position. It's a small group, and it worked well. It was a good balance for Kuiper and doing both of those at the same time.
For sure. So next time we talk, along with all our other philosophical stuff, we should talk about the different things that you've learned doing that ministry. Because I know during our previous conversations and probably in the past year with COVID and whatnot, I'm sure you've learned a ton that we would all benefit from. So that would be awesome.
Sure.
Next time.
Yeah, man. I'd love to. So that sounds really good to me.
Okay. And then also with COVID kind of wrapping up or whatever, it would be fun to get together in person as well.
Absolutely.
We can have you guys over for dinner or something. That'd be great.
Hey, vice versa, whatever works.
Perfect. That sounds good, man. Thanks for coming on and talking and catching up. And yeah, hopefully we'll see each other in person pretty soon.
Yeah, man, love what you're doing. Yeah, I could not resist an invite to be on a podcast. So, yeah, man.
Yeah.
And especially with you, love you. You're a great interviewer. You're a good friend. So
yeah, many more will come for sure. And I love the because I've had obviously other people, and they kind of ask me like, hey, what do you want to talk about? What should I get prepared for or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe this will change as time goes on, but I really like just having no plan whatsoever.
Sure.
Maybe one thought, and then we just go from there. I just find that so fun.
All about it.
But anyways,
dude,
okay, man.
Watch out, Joe Rogan.
Yeah. I have a while till we get there. He's been doing it for like over 10 years. So yeah,
true.
We'll see what happens. But all right, man. Good to see you. See you later.
Good to see you too.
Peace.